Hello and welcome. I'm Michael Bungay Stanier, Senior Partner and Founder here at Box of Crayons. I want to welcome you to our latest webinar, Tools for the Time Crunch Manager. This webinar, as you can see on the screen there, is how to help your people find focus in a world of distractions. And of course, don't forget, you are your people as well. So this isn't just about the people you're managing and leading and influence. It's actually some real tools for you. If you're ever feeling a little overwhelmed, if you're feeling a little stressed, if you feel like you've lost the point about what you're doing, I've got some really useful tools to help you have more impact in the work that you're doing. So who am I? Here I am, a shiny photograph of me. I kind of look the same, I guess. I am the Senior Partner at Box of Crayons, and our goal at Box of Crayons is to help people and organizations do less good work and more great work. The thing we're best known for is our coaching programs, but we do a range of different things as well. So here we go. Before we get into the content, some really quick things, some homework if you like. First is I'd love you to pick up this report, the 3 essential coaching habits for the time crunched manager. So if you've ever wanted to be more effective as a manager and a leader, have your people have more impact, then I think you're going to find a lot of good tactics and insight in this report, available at boxofcrayons.biz. It's free, of course. Secondly, think about joining our LinkedIn group, Tools for the Time Crunch Manager. We've got at least 3,500 people there, a really diverse, interesting community of people sharing tips, insights, struggles, solutions about how they can have more impact as a manager. And I think that's all I wanted to tell you. So let's get going this way to an excellent webinar. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is, if you haven't got it already, pen and paper out, not just because you're going to be taking notes, but I've got some questions about one question, the same question I ask at the start of every webinar. So if you've seen any of the other 5 or 6 in this series, you'll know what question I'm going to ask you. And here it comes. On a scale of 1 to 7, 1 being low and 7 being high, how focused do you plan to be for the next 20 minutes or so? I think that's how long this webinar is going to take, about 20 minutes. How focused? So give yourself a score here. 1, of course, is low. So 1 is you've got as many things out in front of you to distract you as possible. You've got email open, you've got chat open, you've got your phone nearby, you've got paperwork to do. And really this webinar is just pleasant background noise while you get some other work done. 7, on the other hand, you're bringing a Zen-like focus to this webinar. So you've closed the door, you've shut down the email, you've turned off the gadget, maybe put it in a drawer. And of course, I don't mind what number you've given yourself. The choice is entirely yours. However, what I would love you to do is, regardless of the number, make whatever changes and adaptations you need to your environment so that you can be as fully focused as you would like to be during this webinar. Right. Focus. It's a big thing, isn't it? Because let's face it, sometimes when we're at work, it feels like we're actually being attacked by a swarm of locusts, right? There's stuff coming left, right, and center. We're being pulled here, we're being pulled there. If you're not being dragged into meetings the whole time, then you spend your whole time going, I've got 12,012 unread emails cluttering up my life, and I'm going to bed with a little pulsating, beating heart going, I'm just feeling anxious by the amount of overwhelm I've got. And there's an impact from that sense of overwhelm. I think it can go one of 2 ways. One is you become paralyzed by choice. You're not sure which path to take, and as a result, you don't take any path. You kind of just get stuck there, and you're like, I can't move forward. I've got too much coming at me, and I can't seem to make a decision about which is the best way forward. Or sometimes what happens is you get literally tunnel vision, right? And it's just like, there's only one big way forward and I'm going to ignore everything and I'm just going to stick to the road, the path that I'm already on. And sometimes it's not the right path. So neither of those 2 are great results. One is being stuck, overwhelmed, paralyzed by too much choice. The other is fight or flight strikes in, you get narrow tunnel vision, and actually you can only see one way forward and you plow on regardless of whether that's the right way forward. So let me help you with that. I've got some tools to help you with it. I've got 3 Ps and I've got 2 questions. And I think in all of that, there's going to be at least one good thing for you to take away and use. Like I say, not just for the team and those that you lead and manage and influence, but I think also for yourself. This is a tool to help you be more productive and have more impact. All right, let me just check my notes here. Yes, let's get on with the 3 Ps. Okay. We've just started teaching this in actually all of our coaching programs at Box of Crayons, and we've found it to be a really useful, simple model. And it basically goes like this. When somebody comes to you and they're into that conversation about, I've got stuff going on, there are 3 different areas you can point to help people focus on what they might want to talk about. You can either talk about projects, what's the stuff that you're working on? What's the content? What's the kind of gritty doing stuff that you want to look at? That's kind of in some ways the top level, right? The most superficial level. What's the project stuff that we could talk about? The second level is what's the people level, whether it be other colleagues, people on your team, vendors, suppliers, customers. What's the people side of it? And often when you move to people, it becomes a more complex conversation because human beings are complex, messy people, and interacting with them is a complex, messy thing. And then the third level actually goes even a little deeper, and the third level is patterns. And by patterns, I'm not talking about stuff out there. I'm really talking about behavior change patterns of your own. What are ways that you might want to shift the way that you're working? What are ways that you're working to develop your own effectiveness, trying to break some old patterns that no longer serve you? So I think this can be a really simple, powerful model, the 3P model, so that when you're in a conversation and you can say to somebody, what should we look at? There are 3 different areas we could focus on: project stuff, people stuff, or your own pattern stuff. And I think, like I say, I think this goes deeper as you go down that list. And one sort of jargon that we use or we know comes up in our coaching programs is helping people just understand the difference between coaching for performance and coaching for development. Coaching for performance is when you're focused on the task at hand and saying, let's deal with that, let's sort that out. Coaching for development is when you're focused on the person who's doing the task. And when we ask people to think back on a time when they've actually had powerful, effective coaching, stuff that's really struck a chord, stuff that's really had an impact with them, what's interesting is that people almost always talk about the coaching for development side of things. It seems to have a more powerful resonance than the coaching for performance. I'm not saying there's not a place for coaching for performance, because of course there is. One of the jobs you have in your organization is to get stuff done. But also, if you're looking to have real impact and bring real focus, actually, almost counterintuitively, bringing some focus to the person can really help with that. I'm going to come back to this a little bit later on. But just to say, this is the first thing I wanted to share with you, the 3 Ps: projects, people, patterns, as a way of bringing focus to what do we need to talk about, what do we need to look at, what problem do we need to solve. And one thing you could think about is, and this is particularly for all of us who have those kind of weekly or maybe monthly one-to-ones and, those check-in conversations, which in my experience, and maybe the same for you as well, they actually can often be kind of boring and kind of useless because they end up being a read through your checklist and tell me data. And it's like, you know what, I'm trying to be interested, and the person who's telling you is trying to be interested, but it's actually a little bit boring. And there's a way of going, how do we get to what really matters so that we're talking about stuff that actually needs a conversation rather than just a recitation? 3 Ps can help with that. So can the 2 questions. And let me get to those 2 questions right now. Here is question number 1. And I love this question. It's one of my favorites in terms of what we teach in our coaching programs. And it's a powerful way to open almost any conversation. The question is, what's on your mind? What's on your mind? Now, I often think that getting into I'm going to say this, a more coach-like conversation, sometimes it feels like a little bit trying to chat somebody up at a bar. And I don't know what your experience of dating is. Mine was mostly unsuccessful. And I always thought, you know what, I'm sure once I get into a conversation with a beautiful woman or an unbeautiful woman, it doesn't really matter, it will be fine. I'm okay with the conversation. What's hard is to get it going. What's my opening line? Hence the tradition of terrible chat-up opening lines from men with women in particular. And I think it can be a little bit the same with being more coach-like, which is, I want to be more coach-like. When I get there, I can be more powerful, but I don't know how to get started on that. And this question, I think, can help. Here's why I think it works so well. What's on your mind is both open, because it's actually saying to them, why don't you talk to me about what matters to you? You as the manager, the leader, you're not setting the agenda. You're actually saying, tell me, I'm going to give you autonomy. Tell me what matters to you, what's on your mind. But at the same time, it is a little directive at the same time. It's don't tell me anything. Tell me the thing you're excited about, or anxious about, or worried about, or consumed about, or fretting about, or confused about. Tell me that thing, because that's where we can actually have some useful conversations. So I think that's the first question I wanted to share with you, which is what's on your mind? I think it's a really powerful opening question. And if you're looking to build it into a habit, what you want to be thinking about is when and with whom might you start a conversation, what's on your mind? You might want to think to the next set meeting you have, the next one-to-one meeting, the next team reporting meeting that can work with all of those, maybe even the next phone call with somebody. Let's get to the second question. Oh, there we go. I guess this is the metaphor to explain why I like this question, which is there are always options for them to take, but you've given them and made them think about two or three perhaps clear pathways to say, of all the stuff that you could tell me about stuff that matters. What's on your mind? All right, let's get to that second question. Here we go. The second question is this, and we talk about this a lot in the Coaching for Great Work program that we have. It's one of the what we call blue card coaching, about helping people get to the heart of what the real challenge is. And the question is this: what's the real challenge here for you? So you can imagine how this might go. You get in with somebody and you go, okay, so tell me what's on your mind. And they'll either have something or maybe they won't, in which case you can say, well, look, three things you could look at. You could look at projects, people, or patterns, knowing that what's on your mind. And they'll go, oh, okay, right, well, it's blah, 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 blah. And they start talking about the thing that's on their mind. And here's what will happen. Because you're a good person, because you've had years of practice doing this, you're going to attempt to come in and leap to a solution right away. You're going to jump to going, let me help you fix this. And I'm going to say that's not the right thing to do. Because the opening statement is rarely the real challenge. So one of the things you do is you ask what's on your mind. You say, okay, so let me ask you, if that's the thing that's on your mind, what's the real challenge here for you? And what I want you to take away from this, and it's a key learning point, is that this question is really carefully crafted. Because look what happens if you don't say it exactly the way you see it on the screen right now. If I was just to ask you, what's the challenge? You can see how it lands in a different way, doesn't it? And in fact, people are likely to talk in a more abstract, general way, a less personal way, a more kind of almost executive summary way. So it really has less power if you just say, so what's the challenge? And even if you ask, what's the real challenge here? It gets more focused, doesn't it? The real challenge gives it more weight, more focus, but it still can lend itself to a bit of a, let me tell you what I think the problem is for the team or for the organization or for you, the manager. But then when you ask the full question, what's the real challenge here for you? You can feel how that lands with a real tightness and direction and a sense of a move from coaching for development to, coaching for performance to a coaching for development. Here's a metaphor that we use in our programs. If you're asking what's the real challenge or what's the challenge here, really you're looking at the fire. You can see that on your screen there. If you add for you at the end of it, what's the real challenge here for you, you move back to looking at the person. And that's going to be a more powerful conversation most of the time. And again, it comes back to this piece around coaching for performance is at the top. Yeah, important, is a role to play there for sure, but that's where most business conversations happen. Coaching for development not only tackles the task that needs to be done, but actually empowers, stretches, grows, changes the people that you're actually working with. Right, so there we go. I've given you my 3 P's and my 2 questions, P's and Q's, to help you move forward in terms of providing more focus for your people. The 3 P's, projects, people, patterns. The 2 questions, your opening question, what's on your mind? And then that follow-up question, what's the real challenge here for you? Now, when we teach coaching, we say there's 3 parts to the impact of coaching. There's insight about yourself and about the situation that leads to behavior change, that leads to increased impact. So this is a coaching moment, so don't step away from it. Make sure you start translating what I just told you into what matters to you. So write down for me, what are the 2 critical ahas and insights you've taken from this brief webinar? And what's the one thing you're going to do differently? What's the one action you're going to take as a result of that? Write that down. Don't go, yeah, I kind of know what it is and I'm not going to write it down. No, really do. Write this down. It'll serve you well. It'll help some of this stuff stick in your brain. And then very quickly, a few things just to wrap us up here. Who else needs to see this webinar? Is it worth sending the link to your team? Is it worth sending the link to your boss? Is it worth sending it to some friends outside the organization you work with? You'd be doing me a favor and Box of Crayons a favor if you spread the word about this webinar. I'd certainly be grateful for that. And then again, just a quick reminder of some of the free resources we have: the great report, the 3 essential coaching habits for the Time Crunch Manager. Join our LinkedIn group, Tools for the Time Crunch Manager. Just go into LinkedIn, do a quick search for that, and you'll find us, and I'll definitely approve you. And just as a reminder about what we do at Box of Crayons, we help busy managers have practical coaching skills so that they can coach in 10 minutes or less. I'm Michael Bungay Stanier from Box of Crayons. It's great to talk to you. I'm glad you've been stuck with me for this useful webinar.